Um, we've got one more being emitted right now from the UK.
Because they know how much fun we're going to have.
All right, great. Well, we are recording, so we'll go ahead and get started here. We've got one more coming in here. So hi guys, I am Allison Kaczynski with the SATB2 Gene Foundation, and we are excited that you guys are all joining us today for this webinar, Advocating for the SATB2 Community, presented by Carrie Ostrea of Ostrea Consulting. A special thanks to the Child Neurology Foundation for their support in funding our webinar series this year. Carrie Ostrea is a rare disease expert, advocacy strategist, and speaker working with families, nonprofit organizations, and biotech pharma industry partners for more than a decade. Oops, sorry.
So official.
Her role as a Dragon Mom and 9 years as executive director and co-founder of the Little Miss Hannah Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization created to honor her 3-year-old daughter, Hannah, fuels her passion for the rare disease community. Since Hannah lost her battle to Gaucher type 2-3, an ultra-rare genetic disorder, Carrie has dedicated herself to providing expert guidance and training in the strategic and operational aspects of nonprofit management, marketing, research, and patient program development, working with more than 300 rare disease nonprofit organizations. Carrie utilizes her personal and professional experience to mentor and support rare disease nonprofit foundations and biotech pharma companies. She has an MBA in healthcare management from Western Governors University. And today we thank you for joining us, and I'll pass it over to Carrie.
Awesome. I'm so excited. This is probably one of my favorite presentations to get to do because I am basically where you are now. I've been there. And, you know, I always say, I'm in the rare disease space. I've been working in it now for 10 years because of my daughter, and I'll share a little bit about our story. But, you know, this is not what I ever thought I'd be doing with my life, just as probably all of you who are interested in advocating, you know, for this community. I bet you didn't go to college saying, hey, I'm going to work for the SATB2 Foundation when I'm older, or, you know, volunteer. You know, it's just not on our radar. And I have this saying that I always start this presentation with, because I think it's important we kind of recognize it, that, you know, few of us jump into rare disease advocacy because it's our passion. You know, the reality is we do it in order to provide the best quality of life for someone we love. So before I kind of get started into this presentation, I really want to make this interactive. So, you know, feel free to just share your thoughts, or if you have any questions, I'm an open book. And I may be picking on you. So if you're on video, and even if you're not, I may call on you, just kind of share your thoughts. And I see Mary laughing at me, and I love that. Hi, Maria. Hi, Catherine. I can finally see you guys. Because we're the ones who are going to really set the tone for the next generation of SATB2 families. So I wanted to share a little bit about my story. I call it my why, because we all have a reason why we do this. And this was the reason where I got involved. So my youngest of 3, Hannah, was born in July of 2008. We had one good medical day with her. And then our diagnostic journey began on day 2 with an enlarged spleen, liver issues. And at the age of 8 months, she was diagnosed with, neuronopathic Gaucher disease, which with Gaucher disease, there's 3 types. The first is non-neuronopathic, which is kind of like non-neurologic, which had many treatments available, a lot of research. But then there was this subtype of type 2 and type 3, which is the neurologic. And my daughter was diagnosed with the infantile neurologic form of Gaucher disease. So she was diagnosed she was diagnosed at 7 months. And this was the picture of the day, you know, a few weeks after we got the diagnosis. And I remember sitting at Texas Children's Hospital, where we lived in Texas at the time. And they basically said, take her home and love her. And I'm sure, as many of you have kind of experienced, when you got the diagnosis and it may not have been delivered in a very supportive or compassionate way, you're kind of like, okay, well, that's not good enough for me. What can I do? So my husband and I, and again, we had 2 other children. You know, at the time Hannah was born, our son Ethan was 6 and our daughter Abigail was 3. So we had our hands full. But we kind of became parents on a mission. And we divided and conquered. My husband kind of took over caring for the family needs, taking care of the kids, doing, I mean, this is a great husband, laundry, cooking, and all that, because I really wanted to focus on finding something for Hannah. I was not convinced that there wasn't a solution out there to save her life. So these are just some of the few things that, you know, we were dealing with at the time. I reached out to literally every researcher or specialist or scientist who was an expert on Gaucher or any of its family of diseases. There's 51 lysosomal storage diseases. I connected with organization leaders from other rare disease groups because Gaucher disease is considered ultra rare. Hannah was one of 50 kids in the US with her subtype, 300 worldwide. So as you can imagine, there's really not a lot of people even working on it. And those that did, there wasn't a good understanding of how it destroyed the brain. Because what happens is with Gaucher disease, real briefly, is she's missing the enzyme to break down fat. So the fat accumulates in the good cells. And when the fat accumulates, it kind of expands the cell and it cuts off the neurologic function. So all her primitive breathing skills, her, you know, eye movements and things like that. So there wasn't really a good understanding of what to expect. And so, you know, as trying to be a mom on a mission, I would send her fibroblasts or blood samples to anybody who was interested. I sent them to the US, the UK, Israel. We became very involved with the natural history study that was done at the NIH and got very close to all the PIs there. And this was kind of our new normal. You know, when you have a medically complex child, we had a mix of family fun time. We did have treatment for her, which was for the non-neurologic. So it really helped with her spleen and her liver, but because it didn't cross the blood-brain barrier, we still had the neurologic issues. And then we also had the life of, you know, procedures and therapies, lots of EEGs, cardio, vision therapy, developmental therapy, PT, OT, DT. I mean, you name it, we kind of had it in our life. That became our new lifestyle with the 3 kids. So, you know, and part of this advocacy, you know, was important to create awareness. When you have an ultra rare genetic disorder, as you guys know, there's not a lot of people who, 1, understand it, and 2, are willing to listen. So as part of my advocacy efforts, I really made an effort to get her story out there. And it started with a blog. You know, I didn't intend this blog to become a Gaucher blog. I actually started this because it was a place for me to share my pregnancy with my friends because Hannah was a surprise. We didn't expect that. And then, you know, it just turned into a Gaucher blog, a diagnostic blog. And living in Las Vegas, we had moved to Las Vegas when she was about 18 months old. You know, we really made it, and I'll talk about our projects here in Vegas, a strong effort to create awareness in Las Vegas for rare disease because there was none. There's nothing out here. And as part of my advocacy efforts, you know, becoming a pest to a lot of people, talking to media and things like that, you know, we were able to get published in a lot of different places, which really kind of helped elevate the awareness for Gaucher type 2 and type 3. We were in the Scientist magazine, which was our first national publication talking about a toddler or an infant with an ultra rare genetic disorder, which led to a Time magazine article, which was the first time that Time magazine actually paid attention to rare diseases, and they focused on Hannah's story and another family. So we were kind of building momentum to sharing Hannah's story. And as I mentioned, you know, Gaucher disease has treatments for this type 1, the non-neurologic. Cerezyme, which is at the time the only treatment 10 years ago, you know, that was literally the first orphan drug ever approved in the US. And it was also, for the first 10 years, the most expensive drug in the US at $350,000 a year. So the Gaucher community kind of jump-started the whole conversation on rare disease drug development because of Gaucher disease and the work that the NIH did. So the company that made Cerezyme, which was her biweekly infusion enzyme replacement therapy, they ended up having a virus in their manufacturing plants, and they had to shut down for 18 months just to clean the facility. And they had told everybody that, you know what, there's going to be nothing for a year and a half. We're sorry. And at the time, I had connected with about 30 other Gaucher type 2 and type 3 families. And honestly, the Cerezyme gave our kids a quality of life. You know, it made them being able to move. It gave us, it didn't help the brain, but it gave us a lot of other, you know, things that made us feel confident that our kids were doing better than they would have. So I actually reached out to the vice president of Genzyme. And as you can see, I CC'd a ton of people, which included the top researchers, top people at the NIH, and said, begging that they do not stop the treatments for our type 2/3 kids. We know that they had a supply available for emergencies. And I said, you know, we only have 30 kids, but this, you will kill our kids if you don't do this. So this one simple email, which literally took me a week to get the courage to send, kickstarted a whole national conversation on the need to take care of these kids during this shortage. Good news is our type 2/3 kids never missed a treatment. They got their every 2-week treatment of Cerezyme, and we got featured in the Boston Globe, the New York Times, the Washington Post, because this was a story that captured people's attention. You know, how can you kill children if you have this drug available, even though it's in storage? You know, who gets what? So that was really kind of the kickstarting into me saying, you know what, I can do something. I can kind of make a difference in this community. And so, you know, our life kind of went on. When she was about 18 months old, and we were still living in Texas outside Houston, she had a grand mal seizure, which led to a 6-week hospitalization. We went from special needs to medically fragile. We almost lost her twice. She ended up, and if you see the 2 pictures on the left, the first picture is her 2nd week. She developed intense tremors and a movement disorder. She wasn't coherent at all. The bottom picture is week 6 of us. And in between this, my family moved from Texas to Vegas because my husband had lost his job during all this. So, you know, let's make it more complicated. But that last picture on the bottom left is the day before what they call the kangaroo crew, which is their flight ambulance, took her from Texas to Vegas, where she was able to finish recovering. So, you know, it kind of changed our lifestyle. We had to put some of the advocacy on hold because she required 24-hour care. We had nursing, you know, 80 hours of nursing a week. I would take the night shift with Hannah so that we can have nursing when the other 2 kids were in school, so I could at least be present, which, you know, when you're a parent to a medically fragile, rare child, you never look at, you know, take care of yourself. I'm sure all of you are probably saying, well, you know, I kind of suck at taking care of myself too. You know, it's just the way we are. So, you know, this was kind of our journey for the last, you know, she lived with us for 3 years, 4 months, and 9 days, I say. You know, she definitely bypassed the prognosis of what her doctor said. She basically said, screw you, I'm going to show you, which we appreciated because she was very feisty. She was very charming, and she knew how to get what she wanted. So, and she helped us get stuff for her as well. But even though she had passed away, you know, our advocacy didn't stop with my family. During her life, we created the first Facebook group for Gaucher type 2/3. And as you guys probably know, how valuable it is to connect with somebody you don't have to explain things to. Over time, this small little Facebook group, you know, we had families from all over the world. You know, we have almost 300 members now. The sad part of this is about 3/4 of the kids' photos you see there, the kids have passed away. Because the type 2 kids usually pass away by the age of 3. The type 3 kids usually by the age of 12 to 18. So we've had a lot of death, I guess you can say, in this community. But we're still very active. We still support each other. And when I put this picture together, you know, it was just kind of to represent all the kids. And then I remember one day I just looked at the picture, and I don't know if you can see from the photo, but it looked like for the babies, the type 2 kids, all their noses were the same. If you kind of look closely, you can see that they all had, and Hannah too, had a little kind of button nose, and they all look kind of distinct. So I still had a really good relationship with our NIH, you know, principal investigator, and I shared that with her. And lo and behold, it actually became part of the clinical management standard of care that was published. Now, this all came from our community. We found this out. It wasn't something because they had only seen about 20 kids over the course of 5 years. And this to us was a huge win because this was the first physical feature of Gaucher type 2. So, you know, this is kind of started building the community even more. And of course, you know, once you start advocating, and Allison could probably agree with this as well, it's hard to stop. It's hard to kind of shift gears. And one thing my family wanted to do is to create a legacy for Hannah. So we actually created a nonprofit here in Las Vegas where we live called the Little Miss Hannah Foundation. The reason we call it Little Miss Hannah Foundation was because when we lived in Texas, everybody seemed to call her Little Miss Hannah in their Southern accent, you know, being from Los Angeles. I thought it was cool. So we created this literally 2 days after she passed away. Not only in her memory, but in honor of our other 2 kids, Ethan and Abby, because they were a huge part of Hannah's life. And our mission was simple, and it was to enhance the quality of life for children diagnosed with rare, life-limiting, and complex medical conditions in Southern Nevada. And since we started, you know, we've worked with over 240s here in Vegas and other parts of Southern Nevada and represented over 130 rare diseases, which I think is kind of pretty cool considering half of the kids, half of the rare kids that we know don't even have a foundation attached to them. So being able to provide a support for them has been really meaningful to us. Oops. These are our programs. We have our medical and therapy equipment grants. So basically, the reason this is our primary program, we came up with this because we had trouble getting equipment for Hannah, whether it was a chair, high chair, stroller, wheelchair. So we decided to be what we couldn't get. And we have purchased since then, we started over 170 pieces of equipment, totaling over $150,000, which is kind of exciting. We do a lot of family activities. We do a lot of advocacy. And we just 2 years ago actually started doing sibling scholarships because a lot of our kids are medically fragile or passed away. We wanted to recognize the siblings. So the siblings of kids with rare diseases here in Las Vegas can apply for up to $1,000 college scholarship. And that's been a really popular program. And of course, you know, advocacy is always going to be at the heart of what we do here in Vegas and with the Little Miss Hannah Foundation and kind of what my husband and I do nationally as well. We support research initiatives, legislation. We've done a ton of collaborating. This is a photo of us working with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department on a Rare Disease Day event, which was kind of cool. You can see a 6-foot jean ribbon there, which we brought to a lot of places. And Officer Jeff, who I adore completely, all those little postcards are messages from the police department to our rare kids that they created. Some of them made them very artistic. It was really kind of cool. We do a 5K every year. Our Vegas Cares About Rare Kids 5K. Our last one was this February 28th. We had over 850 people in Las Vegas show up, and we netted over almost $50,000, which was amazing. And then 2 weeks later, COVID hit. So we're kind of like, thank God we got the 5K in because this year it's going to be virtual, which is so much fun. And also we've been really lucky here in Las Vegas. We have gotten a ton of TV and radio support. This is a picture of us with one of the anchors from our CBS station who has actually since become a very good friend of the organization. She will put us on 3 to 4 times a year. She will do updates on our families. I mean, she has really embraced the work we do. So I know I'm like throwing my whole story out at you guys. Does anybody have any questions or comments before I continue on? All right, well, if you do, just say, hey, Carrie, and just stop me. So as I kind of shared at the beginning and Allison shared as well, I kind of took my advocacy from being a parent to being a professional. You know, I worked for an organization called Global Genes, which some of you may have heard of. For a number of years. I was actually employee number 7 way back when they first started, which was really kind of cool. I created their Foundation Alliance program, which was my way of helping to educate and support patient groups like ours and yours. I also got to work with a ton of biotech and industry partners on a lot of projects. I really had a lot of opportunity to kind of take my business knowledge, because I have a business background, my patient I could talk today. My patient advocacy experience, both personally and working with all these rare disease groups, and just really make it into my career. This is something I really want to do for the rest of my professional life. Someday I'll want to retire, as we all do. But I love getting the opportunity to speak. You know, I've been able to be at conferences on a number of topics, anything from patient engagement to working with biotech pharma to nonprofit building and a lot of advisory boards. So I really love the idea of making our community stronger. And that's really part of the reason we're doing this presentation today, is because I started where you guys are, and what the work I do today is where you could be in a few years if that's something you want to do. And I kind of want to close off my why, and this is the important part of why I do what I do. You know, I always say, and I tell people this, you know, as parents, our goal is to equip our children with the tools they need to be positive and productive members of society. You know, Ethan is 20 years old now. He's a sophomore in college studying psychology and anthropology because he wants to work for the FBI. Abby is 16 going on 21, doing a junior doing distance learning here in Vegas, which is going oh so well. But you know, with Hannah, it was pretty simple. We just wanted to keep her happy and pain-free. And with our advocacy, you know, this is our way to parent Hannah. You know, she's not here to be able to make that positive change in the world. So we're going to do it for her. So every time I get to share her story, every time I get to train somebody on how to be a stronger advocate, anytime I can empower someone to do something that maybe they didn't feel they had the confidence to do, it's all because of her. So that is my story. And I really kind of want to shift it over to a couple of you and kind of share what your why is. Who are you here for, and why is advocacy important to you? And if nobody speaks up, I am going to pick on people. So if anybody kind of wants to share their thoughts, let me know. And make sure you come off mute. All right, so you're gonna make it pick. There we go.
I'll go since yeah. So I'm here, Allison Kaczynski. My why is my daughter. My daughter Caitlin. She's 6 years old. We got her diagnosis when she was a week old, and at the time there was no Dr. Zarate. There were no case studies. There was no Facebook page. And I said, much like Carrie, it's got to be easier. We shouldn't have to fight this hard. And so I just really want to change that and make families know that they weren't alone.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mary? I'll go. So I guess
this is great.
When we were first diagnosed, you know, the doctors basically told us there's nothing she'll ever be able to accomplish. You know, she'll never be able to do anything. And I just remember thinking, well, yeah, you know, like we can do more. And I wanted to give hope to other families when I felt like so many doctors were saying there is no hope for your kid. Yeah. Like your kid will never achieve anything. And we have two. So.
All right, Jenna, did you want to share?
Yeah. So for me, you know, I was blessed, fortunately, to come in to this diagnosis with a more developed foundation. You know, we just got our diagnosis a year and a half ago, or actually a year ago. But through that, I found there's a lot of discrepancies in the early intervention system from state to state, and, you know, just what's available for everybody individually. And I just can't even believe how unfair it is to some of the other states. You know, I live in a state in Pennsylvania where fortunately we have so many resources available to us, but, you know, I know people that live all over the country that just don't have those same resources. And so they're forced to work 2 jobs or 3 jobs, you know, to pay for these things. And, you know, it really lit a fire in me to want to change that.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, that personal reason. Does anybody else want to share?
Sure.
Yeah, Maria does.
I'm Maggie. I'm here for my sister, Marcy, who's 43. We got a late diagnosis on her, and I just want to do whatever I can to, you know, have her live a better life and be there for her as much as I can.
It's all about quality of life, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Because time is unknown, but the time we do have, we just want them to have the best quality of life they could possibly have.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Maria, you wanted to share?
Hi. So when we walked out of the geneticist clinic and they told us that Kai was first diagnosed, I felt really relieved that I'd actually found a diagnosis, because everybody before just said it's global development delays. And even Kai's pediatrician said to me, why do you need a diagnosis? And I found that quite a confusing question, because I thought, well, surely if we get a diagnosis, then, you know, we know what's ahead, we know what we can do to help. So I walked out and I actually felt really pleased, and I decided there and then in a car park that I was going to do the best I could to find and provide the best help to get whatever the best was of Kai's ability for him to achieve that. And that was my initial thought. And then over the years, we've been diagnosed now for probably about 5 years ago, and now it's just a complete turnaround. So I now do it for the other parents so that they don't have to go through the fight of as soon as you realize. So basically Kai has osteoporosis, and the only reason we found that out was because I met another family whose older son, who was 19 at the time, also had osteoporosis, and I had no idea whatsoever that Kai had it. She told me there and then to get him checked. He was only about 7 at the time. I managed to find a doctor that listened to me. We went and got checked, and everybody at the hospital was saying, why are you here? And obviously when you say another parent told me I should, you get a funny response from the specialists.
Right.
But they did listen, and then actually we did find out. So without the other parent support, I just feel like we wouldn't be here. None of us would be here without each other. And none of the specialists would listen to us without each other. So my quest now is to get the specialists to listen to the parents, basically.
I love that. And that's so true. And you guys are, you know, in a similar position that we are, you know, because of your loved one, because of the work you do, you're going to make it easier for another family. And that's, you know, because of the person that you love, that you're here because of, whether it's your child, your sibling. Does anybody else want to share before we move on? All right. Well, if you do, Catherine, did you want to say something? Or Crystal?
Yeah, I've come to this journey late. We're from Australia. Our daughter was diagnosed at 32 after being, you know, we've had, her journey's been through, you know, with a lot of diagnoses, but mainly just developmental delay of unknown etiology. So to suddenly have a diagnosis and to realise that, yes, she ticks all the boxes that all children with SAT2 have been, it's answered a lot of questions. It hasn't changed what we do, but it's made us make sure that we look after her needs from now on, and we make sure things like osteoporosis are checked. And that if anyone else presents like Rachel, that we might be able to help them with what we've done and what might happen for their person in the future.
Yeah.
But again, it's an education thing. There's not much in Australia, and we certainly don't have any centres of excellence like you have in the States.
Not yet, anyways.
Not yet, yeah.
All right, Crystal, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes. Hi. I don't know if I'm on.
You're good.
Okay. I'm doing this for my daughter, who is 14. We are in Hawaii, and we've only met another family so far here. And the reason I'm doing it also for my daughter is to learn more about it and to connect with other people who are going through the same thing as I am with her, as it is very difficult at times. And doing it kind of as a single parent as well. So it's tough. So that's why I'm doing it.
And it's kind of, you're making your extended family stronger, because there's going to be all these people here to support you.
Yes.
So.
Thank you.
Hi. No, I'm glad you shared. So, you know, what comes to mind when you think of advocacy? You know, the general public looks at advocacy as legislative. You know, I'm going to advocate for this initiative. I'm going to advocate for this. You know, we kind of think of advocacy in the rare disease space a little bit differently. The way we look at advocacy is, quote, to create change. And it doesn't matter what that change is. It can be, you know, legislative, obviously, but it could also be, you know, healthcare professional education. There are so many different ways that we can advocate. You know, for personal advocacy, you know, here's just some situations where we do advocate. You know, we advocate with our healthcare team. We advocate, you know, if the person is an adult or if you're a parent who works, you know, you have to kind of advocate for your needs as a parent or a working adult in the workplace. You know, dealing with the school system, if your child has a 504 or an IEP, you know, that's a heavy advocating. You know, for those who's ever done an IEP, that is not a fun or easy process. I see a lot of you just like, no, it's not. And also you kind of have to advocate within your community to get the support you need. You know, and this kind of leads to our next discussion on perception versus reality. You know, I love this quote. You know, I appreciate your perception of reality. However, your perception is not reality. So I kind of wanted to open this up a little bit, you know, to see what do you think the general public thinks this disorder is? So if someone wants to share, Jenna?
I don't think they think anything of it. As soon as it comes out of my mouth, they're like, what? What is that?
Yeah. Anyone else have a similar response or a different response?
I'll go. I think a lot of times when people hear that it's rare, you know, and there's only a few hundred of us around the world, they just kind of check out and don't necessarily think much of it, kind of like Jenna said.
Yeah. And, you know, that's where the stigmas come in because, you know, when you have a rare disease, is it worth putting the money and time in to only help a few people? But when you're one of those few people, it means the world to you. You know, and I think this is important for us to kind of recognize that the general public, even healthcare providers, they really don't understand this disorder. So we have to become the experts, whether you like it or not. You know, when I think about healthcare providers, the reality is there's over 7,000 rare diseases. Some people say there's now 8,000 known rare diseases. You know, how can we expect healthcare professionals to know all of them? We can't, you know, it's our responsibility to educate. However, I feel they owe us a responsibility to be open to learning about it. You know, and that's where we kind of have to advocate for is educating them and encouraging them to care enough to learn because they have the knowledge that they can kind of piece part of it together. So let's talk about the reality of living with the disorder. You know, I grabbed this from your information sheet because I thought this was wonderful. You know, not a lot of groups put this together. But does somebody want to talk about the lifestyle, you know, of having a child or having a loved one with this, you know, and we could talk about financial, you could talk about work, you know, how it affects the siblings. Does anybody want to share, you know, how this has affected their family lifestyle? Go ahead, Maria. Oh, just jump in. You're good.
Do you know it's tough. It's tiring. A lot of the time you feel quite exhausted, but at the same time, it just becomes your reality. It really does. Mm-hmm. I know you've mentioned that on there as well, but you know, it's every now and then you kind of take a step back and you think, I can't remember the last time that I actually spoke to my other child or when on the last time that I didn't feel anxious, the last time that you just went out for the day and appreciated something really simple that you don't normally notice because all your attention is normally just focused on them. I generally feel like my life before was a different life.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think a lot of us can probably relate to that.
But also it's not all negative. I generally feel like it's been a blessing, and I've just, although it was almost like a different road, and I've got to this point in my life and I'm heading down a different road, and I know people say they wouldn't change it, but the amount of people that I've met that are just amazing, and it's just made me more humble. The skills I've learned, you know, from being a hairdresser, and now I've done my level 1 and 2 in signing, and you know, and just some of the skill set that I just never in a million years thought I'd ever work with special needs or even have a special needs, has just completely opened up so much more that I never knew I was even capable of. So that's been really enlightening.
I love that, because, you know, people always on the outside think of all the burdens that we have. But I always say with Hannah, we had unconditional love. You know, she just loved people. And there was no, you know, there was nothing behind it. When you have toddlers, young adult, and now teenagers, you know, there's sometimes, you know, they have a reason for their asks. Oh, mommy, I love you so much. How much money do you want? You know, things like that. I think there are some gifts. And I say that all the time. Hannah gave us so many gifts. Does anybody else want to share their reality or add to what Maria shared? All right, so we'll keep going on. So this is going to be one of our first little workshops. And Allison, I'm going to pick on you first, since, you know, you're kind of brought us all here together. So here's our exercise. And then if there's one other person I would love to kind of have do this after her, you know, think about that, because otherwise I don't want to pick on people, but I will. If you had 30 seconds to explain the importance of awareness, research, and or funding to a very influential person or group, what would you say? Kind of think about, you know, who that person is going to be. Is it a legislator? Is it, you know, a venture capitalist? Is it a media person? And let me know when you're ready to go, because I am going to actually time you.
Oh, wow.
Want 10 minutes.
And just so everybody knows, I was not actually prepped on this.
No, you were not. That's why I do it. It's an exercise. So you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, and go.
So SATB2 associated syndrome is important because it affects so many children around the world, children and young adults. We're finding our family is growing more and more day by day, month by month. So while we were 20 kids 6 years ago, we are, you know, over 500 kids now. So funding SATB2 research really is important to be able to give these children a voice and to be able to give them the quality of life that they deserve and the families deserve. That's hard.
Yeah, but the reality is, if you run into someone, you're not going to have time to prep, are you?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So does anybody else want to try this? All right, Catherine, I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to pick on you. Okay, is that all right?
Mute.
You ready?
Yeah.
Ready, set, go.
SATB2 syndrome, you probably haven't heard of this, but our daughter has been recently diagnosed with this disease, and it actually answers a lot of questions that we have. You know, children who have, or people that have this disease have difficulties with speech, palatal abnormalities, dental abnormalities, behavioural issues. But many of them, although it manifests before they're 2, they often aren't diagnosed till much, much later. But if we can do some research in this area, we can really find out what the future is for these kids.
It's hard, isn't it, guys? I don't do this to put you guys on the spot. I just want you to realize this is really a difficult thing. But this is going to be important as you advocate. And so as we look at these 2 speeches, was there a why attached to any of this? There was some why. But the question's important is there a specific ask? Neither of you had time to ask what it is that you wanted. You shared what was important, you shared your why, and you also need to say why they should care and the impact that can have. So, you know, I am a huge believer in the 30-second elevator speech. This is something that you learn over time. We've heard that term in business for many years. I'm sure every single one of you have probably heard it at some point in your life. Whether you are in a professional career or at any time, you know. So I kind of wanted to walk through what an elevator speech looks like, you know, because I think if you can create your 30-second speech, and this will be part of your homework, and Allison, you know, will be there to help you, and I'll always be around. You'll have my contact information if you want to work on it. Because you're going to hopefully have opportunities where you only get 30 seconds to make an impact. And you want to be prepared to make sure you can make the impact. So when you run into somebody, you know, what is the bottom line? What is it you want that ask to be? You know, if you run into a news reporter, you know, your ask is, would you do a story you know, or would you do some kind of media to share our story? If you run into a legislator, your ask may be, you know, something to the effect of funding the NIH, or, you know, the telehealth is a big thing now, and there's initiatives on that. If you run into somebody at church, you may know a physician who works in, you know, a field that's important to SATB2, you know, you want to be introduced to them. You know, there's always, start thinking of your ways. And I will send these slides to Allison. So if anybody wants them, Allison, you can have them, that you can feel free to send these out. So what's the bottom line? What's your ask, and why should they care? Because you just talking about your why and not bringing them into it, they're just going to, it just sounds like you're rattling something off. You need to bring out the empathy in them. Be yourself and be confident. This is, I cannot stress how important this is, because if you sound like you're reading from a mental slide deck, or if it sounds like you're just being clinical, you know, that's not who you are. You are a parent, you are a patient, you are a loved one, you know, sibling who wants change for your family and for the bigger community. And if you can, close in an unforgettable way so that they don't forget you. We did this workshop. Usually I do this presentation in person, which is easier to pick on people, obviously. But we do this presentation in person, and someone actually came up with the idea of always carrying around these, it was a, don't laugh, but it was really creative, a urine jar filled with certain colored M&Ms representing the molecules, because they just have now their first urine test to test for the disease. So she keeps these little urine jars with these M&Ms with the logo on the top. That's creative. That's why I want to carry little urine cups with me everywhere, but it makes an impact. You don't forget. Not saying you should carry urine jars, but kind of be creative. And then, you know, when you have the opportunity to share more of your story, you know, I am a huge proponent. I do a ton of training on storytelling, because to me, this is where we stand apart in the rare disease community from common disorders and other types of nonprofit services. You know, we have something that not only are we passionate about why we're doing it, but we're on a time crunch. We don't have time to wait for something to happen. We have to make things happen. So how you tell your story is really important. You know, so why do we tell our stories? We want to connect with someone. We want to inspire some kind of change. You know, very importantly, we talked about the reality and perception. We want to challenge those assumptions. You know, if people don't understand, you know, some of the effects and how it, you know, the effects of the disorder and how it affects, let's say, your child's school life, you know, we need to challenge what they think. We need to be heard. You know, if you're an advocate, you may find this hard to believe, but before Hannah, I was very shy. I wouldn't talk in public. You know, that was just not my thing. And in the last 10 years, I probably, not kidding, have presented at least 500 times, and definitely much more confident in sharing my story. But, you know, that's not something I was born to do. We need to expose the realities of this disorder. People need to understand this is more than just a genetic name. This is our families. This is our loved ones. This is our future, you know, your family's future, your community's future, and you want to stand out. You know, your story is one of, if you're going like on Capitol Hill for Rare Disease Week, which is now in July, but that's another story, you know, love COVID. But if you're going on Rare Disease Week and, you know, speaking with legislators, they're going to be hearing 300 stories that week. How can you make yours stand out? And it's also, like I said, you know, with my personal story, it's a journey of self-discovery. I never thought I would be an advocate. I was just, that was not my mentality growing up. I was the one who just let things happen. I didn't really push to make things change, but Hannah kind of changed my entire life with that, as most kids, you know, every one of our kids do. And I love this quote, and I think it's really important, and I'm going to read it out loud because I definitely want you to think about it. You know, stories engage people at every level, not just in their minds, but in their emotions, values, and imaginations, which are the drivers of real change. So if we want to transform society, we must learn to tell and listen to a new set of stories about the world we want to create. And I love this saying because I think this kind of hits the rare disease, what the rare disease community is trying to do. So let's kind of talk about the functional side of storytelling. You know, there are some rules. These are not, you know, published rules or hard and fast. So these are just kind of rules that I've kind of learned over the last decade or so. You know, keep your story to 3 minutes or less. How many of you have heard people tell their story, and it might not even be about SATB2, and they go on and on and on, and you're like gone after about 3 or 4 minutes. Figure out a way to keep your story, your impact within that 3 minutes, because the first 3 or 4 minutes is when people are most engaged. Some people have a shorter attention span, you know, it could be 90 seconds. And one of the other really important rules is telling your story with empathy versus sympathy. You know, you don't want to tell your story and make people upset or cry and say, oh my God, that's horrible. And kind of, because when you tell your story with sympathy, people kind of step back because it makes them afraid. It, you know, makes them confront things that they don't want to deal with. But if you tell your story with empathy, kind of like I shared Hannah's story with you, I didn't make you cry. I didn't make you feel sorry for me, I hope, because that was not the goal. But I wanted you to you know, when you tell a story with empathy, you want them to say, wow, I understand what happened to you. That's horrible. What can I do to help? And that what can I do to help part is what the empathy is really geared toward, because we want them to help. I never tell Hannah's story because I want to just, you know, make someone sad. If I'm going to share Hannah's story, there's a reason, there's an ask behind it. I want to have a reason to share her story. I want the reason I share it to be meaningful. So always have some kind of ask. And it could be as simple as, you know, would you mind if I reach out to you to talk about something else? You know, it doesn't have to be a concrete ask. It could be a more vague ask, but always find a way to keep that connection going. And create an outline of what you want to say. Never create a script, because if you start going off a script, it looks rehearsed, and everybody can tell a rehearsed story. They kind of get bored by it. And like I shared earlier, again, you know, practice is important. This is not unless, you know, you're an entertainment, an actor, or, you know, someone who does public speaking for a living. None of us are kind of prepared for this, you know. Practice with a timer, do it in front of a mirror, video yourself, have, you know, your children video. You know, I did that once. So don't recommend it all the time if they're younger. Do it with your friends, ask them for their honest feedback. You know, start considering, you know, once COVID, you know, we can start traveling again. This is kind of for that. You know, reach out to your church or temple or any community groups and just say, you know, can I have 10 minutes to share our story? You know, certain groups like Lions Club, I think it's called, you know, their pillar of support is vision related issues. So, you know, I have had a lot of rare disease groups that have vision as one of the primary symptomatology speak to Lions Clubs, and just to start practicing and sharing their story and actually gaining support for what they're doing. So does anybody have any questions on the storytelling side of things before we kind of move on, or want to share any storytelling experiences you've had? Nope. You guys are all thinking about your stories, aren't you? All right, so let's talk about the 5 types of rare disease advocacy. You know, this is something we came up with when I was at Global Genes to kind of quantify our, you know, how we see ourselves and our passions. So we look at rare disease advocacy in 5 different buckets. The first is obviously the legislative bucket. How many of you have done, you know, Rare Disease Day event or met with your legislators? Has anybody done that? Just raise your hand if you had. Nobody. Wow. Okay. Well, we'll have to get you, if you're interested in the legislative side of things, let me know. I can connect you to the right people, or Allison can as well. Creating awareness, you know, in the general public is important. Creating support, community support, family support, school support, you know, and healthcare professional education. I love that photo of the doctor, because that's kind of how I felt like every time I would bring Hannah to a new specialist and be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, you know, healthcare education, healthcare professional education is hugely important. And then finally, research. You know, many of us are motivated to push research. And so looking at those 5 areas, we actually have an acronym, because what's life without an acronym, right? It's called LASER, you know, legislative, awareness, support, education, and research. And I think the most important part of this is figuring out where your passions are. So I'm going to just pick on you guys. Mary, I'm going to start with you. Looking at these 5 areas of advocacy, what is it that you think you're drawn to, that you're passionate about?
I really like advocating with IEPs. I love going into those meetings and making people squirm.
I love it.
But also just kind of teaching, hey, not everyone can be tossed into a one-size-fits-all program. You know, you're going to have to actually get individualized goals and individualized look at the child, not just, well, you know, we'll stick them into 20 minutes of group speech therapy and they'll be good. You know, just, yeah. So that's my favorite thing.
So you'd be under the general awareness, because we kind of include that as making school districts aware of what's involved. Jenna, what about you? And then Maria, I'm going to pick on you after.
For me, it would definitely be family support. I actually have my degree in social work.
Do you really?
So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
So working with people is a huge passion of mine, and family support would be where I'd want to work.
All right, Maria, how about you? Oh, you're still on mute. Nope. Are you having trouble with your mute? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Probably, I'll say general awareness as well.
Nice.
Yeah, general awareness, but including the specialists as well. I like to link a lot of the parents with any professional and then just copy everybody in.
I love that. Allison, what about you? I know you do everything. You do all of the above, but you know, what is it you're passionate about? If you could choose one or two.
It's hard to choose just one or two. I feel like for me, I think the research side and family support and general awareness are kind of my 3 passions.
I love that. Anybody else want to share? Catherine, Maggie, Crystal, anybody else? Casey? Just feel free to hop off mute.
For me, I'm like Jenna. I also I'm a speech pathologist by training who's specialised in nonverbal communication prior to having Rachel. So I've done a lot of work with family supports and also the healthcare professionals living where we live in rural Australia. So as Rachel was growing up, I was the one that was her advocate. You know, she didn't have staff coming out regularly, and even now, you know, we're the ones that are fighting for her and explaining what she can do and how people that with these type of conditions, how their skills can be improved and how they can work, how we can all work together better. So probably those 2 would be my areas.
Crystal, I saw you come offline, off mute.
For me, family support and general awareness, and also the why, the scientific part of it. For the general awareness is more so just educating others to be aware of what it's all about, what the rare disease is, and like I mentioned before, the family support. I think that's very important to connect with other people going through the same thing. That's for me.
That's great. And as you guys noticed, there was a mix of a little bit of everything within just this small group of people. So, you know, the important thing about this is really if you're going to advocate for this community, pick what it is you're passionate about. There will always be work that needs to get done, and your help will always be, you know, very much valued to help get that stuff done. But in terms of finding out where your passion is and finding projects that fit your passion, I think is really important, because the more passionate you are about something, the more involved you want to get into it. So I'm going to move us on. And Allison, I know we're a little over time. Is that going to be a problem?
You're good. And we keep going as long as
I just talk and talk and talk. So So I want to talk just briefly about advocacy by reach. You know, these are the different types of advocacy, and we have legislative advocacy, which if you can, you know, get an initiative implemented, that reach could be millions of people, right? But it takes a lot of work to get to that legislative advocacy level. You can work within the foundation, advocate within the foundation, and it's maybe less people, but it's more targeted. You can advocate or create awareness at a community event. Again, less people, more targeted, even more. A local support group. It could be, you know, some rare disease groups have members who go to local moms clubs, you know, for children of cerebral palsy, even though their child may not have cerebral palsy, but they get support and they can share within that group of moms. And then finally, just the one-on-one sharing with your friend or family member. These are all the different types of advocacy. You can see the different kind of reach. And I like sharing this because it really only takes one person to start a movement. You know, creating this foundation, it took the brainchild of one person to start the ball rolling. And with any of these different types of advocacy, whatever your passion it is, it takes that one person. And you do need that one person. So looking at this graph, or graphic, I should say, which type of advocacy do you think is the most impactful? Does anybody have an idea? And if you want, you just put 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on. Oh, Mary, you want to share?
No, I was going to say it's the way you have the most impact is the one that you'll actually do.
Yeah, excellent. Very few people catch up on that. Anybody else want to share? Okay, so here I'm going to share a little bit of story with you. So like I said, I've done this presentation almost about 50 times in the last 5 years at various family conferences. And I learned at one conference very early on was a story of this woman who was very shy, didn't want to reach out. And after we did this presentation, she came back to me and shared with me that she told somebody in her church about her son's diagnosis. Turns out this woman happened to be married to some big physician at their local children's hospital in the specialty that her son's disorder was a primary symptom of. One thing led to another. That physician husband connected with one of his colleagues in their teaching hospital and actually reached out to the organization and started a project with them, all because of this one little boy. So it just took this one woman sharing with someone at church who happened to be connected. And now, 3 years later, they're actually looking into preclinical trial right now for this one project, which is huge. If you guys, know how drug development works, just getting to this point is huge. And it was all from that one conversation. And the reason I share that is because the larger outreach, legislative has the biggest outreach, but it doesn't always equal the power of the advocacy. So whatever level, and Mary, you're absolutely right, whatever level you're comfortable at will make an impact. So you just got to figure out what it is you're comfortable with and what it is you want to do. And I share this. This is a quote that our foundation has always used from the beginning. And here's the facts. There's very little research being done. There's very little awareness on the syndrome. There's very few people working to help the community. And there's very few families that you have connected just yet. This is where our work comes in. This is why we advocate for this community. And this was a saying that one of our families created years ago. Without awareness, there's no funding. Without funding, there is no research. Without research, there is no cure. And without a cure, there is no hope. And we need to make sure we work together to make sure there is always hope. And so to me, this, whatever level, if you want to work on awareness, if you want to work on fundraising, if you want to talk to researchers and, work with a registry or a natural history study or clinical trials, all these different areas need to be tackled in order for you guys to bring hope to the community. Does anybody kind of want to share their thoughts on that or disagree? Or what do you think? Allison, do you have any thoughts on what's out there for this community and what the biggest needs are?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we have as a SATB2 associated syndrome community is that we're also well connected with each other, our close supporting each other and just really looking to help each other. So I think we have some very passionate families that are really ready,
Small but mighty, right?
right? They've already stepped up, or they're ready to step up, and we're finding the right avenues to get everybody moving. And it takes a village, and I'm so happy to be part of this village.
Yeah. And that's where, this few families connected can become more families. And we want to find these more families because we want them connected with the work that the families that are working together are doing. So this is, I think, where you guys come in, and sharing what you've learned today with other people, I think is going to be really important. There's so many different ways to get involved with the organization. And I think if you guys really want to continue making change, just showing up today is huge. Registering for this webinar, even if you couldn't make it live, but watching it later, is huge. That is a huge first step. And thank you for that, because that means you are motivated to do something. Now it's just kind of figuring out what it is you can do that would be a good fit for you. So these are some different areas that you can get actively involved. I mean, they go from anywhere from professional to administrative to, meeting planning once you guys do conferences, graphic design, advisory boards. You kind of think about the different areas that you would love to kind of get more involved in. And then I think what's most important, if you walk away with anything, if you want to help the organization, you need to reach out to them and let them know what you're capable of. Running a nonprofit myself, we have people come and say, oh, I want to volunteer to help. Well, I've got, I'm trying to balance 20 different things, and it's really hard for me to say, oh, well, I have A, B, and C. But if someone came to me and said, I have a personal connection to this community and I have experience in graphic design, can I help you? I'd be like, oh, yes, I need a new brochure done. Or, I have experience with planning conferences. Do you need help planning your next conference? Come up with specific asks based on your passions and your priorities. I always joke, go old school, write them down, because, when you're a special needs parent, or, your brain is going in 15 different directions. And I live by I even have it right here, my little notebook that I write everything down, even though it ends up digital too. And share when you reach out to the organization. Be action oriented. Say what your skill sets are. Say, you can say, I have 10 hours a month available to help with administrative tasks, put me to work. Have people be specific in their volunteer asks. Again, being proactive is really important. The organization has its hands in so many different projects, and by people sharing what it is they can help with, being specific, that really helps the board leadership to figure out where a good fit would be for you. And you may already know this, and I'm going to pass this actually over to Allison to talk a little bit more about getting involved, a little bit more involved. So Allison, I'm going to pass this over to you, but before I do, I want to share this little graphic because this is me in a nutshell. And it probably is you too if you're in this meeting and you're an advocate. So Allison, I'm going to pass it over to you right now.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much. This has been great. So as Carrie has here on the screen, we do have a volunteer survey. You can go to our website, SATB2gene.org /get involved. Take a few minutes, fill out a survey, let us know some different areas that you might be interested in. We're also working to kind of update this as well now that we've evolved as an organization, but this is a great starting point. And another resource I'd really like to point out is if you are on Facebook, we did create a closed Facebook page called the SATB2 Gene Foundation Volunteers. You can request access to that, and that's just a great place where many of us are there, and I can post projects, different ideas. Sometimes I just need bouncing ideas off for a newsletter title or different subject story gatherings, but I often post projects there to hopefully find somebody that might be interested in that particular thing. So I hope you'll look up those two resources and join.
Allison, would you mind putting that Facebook group link in the chat in case somebody is interested?
Yes, that's a great idea.
So here's my email. So if you want to work on your story, or if you have any questions, I'm always around. I've been doing this a long time. I love being a part of the rare disease community. Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything we talked about today?
Yes, I do. It seems like I know a lot of people. Hang on, I'm also copying down your address there. Okay. It seems like I know a lot of people that would love to do something legislative, but they're so overwhelmed and it's so scary and new, they don't know the first step to take. What would that be?
Contacting the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. They are the nonprofit, it's a nonprofit organization that actually focuses solely on rare disease advocacy. And every year, it's been at least 6 or 7 years, I've gone 4 of the years, they bring over 200 to 300 advocates to Washington, D.C. For Rare Disease Week. And it includes legislative training, meeting with your legislative representatives. It also includes a movie night and art show. I mean, they really do a great job. But they are the ones that have trained the majority of us, because none of us get into this, you know, legislative side, but they've trained the majority of us in how to understand this whole process.
Sorry, could you say the name of that one more time? I was not writing quick enough.
No, Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. And let me see if I can pull it up real quick just so I can show you, since you guys don't need my slides anymore. Let me pull this up real quick. Yeah, and the good thing about Every Life is they also provide stipends for Rare Disease Week. So, you know, especially if you're in a state that they don't have representation. Like I'm in Nevada. My husband and I, with the exception of 1 year, have been the only Nevada families for years. So we've been very fortunate to usually get a stipend to help cover travel. Oh, really? It didn't come up. Let's try that again. Maybe they're having problems with their website. Can you guys see this?
I can see it. I put the address in the chat as well.
Oh, perfect.
I'll be sure, Mary, to post that out as well.
So they also do newborn screening, which is really cool. I mean, I'm part of their newborn screening community congress and working committee, but they have a ton of resources. And this is really the first stop anybody should go to if they're interested in legislative.
Are they?
That's a great question.
Are they based mainly in the US or is that international?
They are based mainly in the US, but if you reach out to them, they do have international counterparts they work with. And they're just, I mean, I can't promote them enough because they took, when I was with Global Genes, we always shoved the legislative stuff to them because they were such a great partner. So if you're interested, as you can see, Rare Disease Week is now going to be July of next year because we can't bring people together in February, but I will probably be there. So that was a great question. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Carrie, I know we mentioned Global Genes as being a great resource for the rare disease community. There's the NORD, the National Organization of Rare Disease, and then Every Life. Are there any other overarching organizations or groups that you suggest our families look into as well?
In the US, those are the top 3 I usually recommend. They really encompass what we need here in the States. In Europe, there's EURODIS, which is EURODIS. There is a group in Australia, and I'm drawing a complete blank on the name. I will find that. But there is a group in Australia that has done tremendous work in that country as well. The reality is, it seems it's really hard when you're an English-speaking organization and the majority, if not all, of your more active board members and volunteers speak English, to be able to find those connections in the non-English speaking countries. So it seems the ones that we do know that there's a Canadian association, which is like NORD. We do know there is a Chinese one in China and a group in India. But as for other non-speaking countries or non-English speaking countries, it's really difficult to connect with. And we usually use EURODIS as the go-to to try and find anything outside of the US and actually outside of Northern America.
Great. I'll link to all of those as well. I'm familiar with most of those, so I'll be sure to share those with all of our families.
Yeah, and so Catherine shared SWAN in Australia. SWAN is actually Syndromes Without a Name, and that's their undiagnosed group. I want to say it's Rare Voice, or Rare, let me see, Rare Australia. Rare Voices Australia is what it is. Here, I'll share this as well. This is an organization that I worked a bit with when I was with Global Genes. I haven't really worked much with them since I became a consultant when I left 3 years ago. But they're very organized in the work that they're doing. Oh, Casey's got babies. I miss babies. They're still cute back then. Does anybody else have any questions for me? Like I said, I'm an open book, so feel free to ask anything. And if you need me, Allison's got my contact information. I shared it earlier as well. If you want to talk about, any part of advocacy, how you get more involved, feel free to reach out to me, reach out through Allison. We've all got to kind of work together to make this happen. So thank you, Allison, for letting me come and share today. I appreciate it.
Carrie, we appreciate you and everything that you do for the rare disease community and taking the time to help educate the STAT2 associated community. So I look forward to working with you and with everybody else that has either joined us live or is viewing this at a later time. We certainly, as the STAT2 Gene Foundation, look forward to having as many families involved in helping you find your passion. So feel free to contact me at Allison@SATB2gene.org. So thank you all and have a great day.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.